So I saw this chart online that said that the top 5 most popular keys in music are G major, C major, D major, A major, and C sharp major. All major keys. What? So I figured, why not do a major key tier list?
Major key.
In my mind, some of these keys sound better than others. One of them feels like a trip to the Microsoft Windows XP field. One of them feels like a lump of salt. So, without further ado, let's get into it. But before we get into it, don't forget to like and, subscribe. That'd be so nice. And ring the bell from where I pick pranks. Number 5, C sharp major. Mr. Brightside by the Killers, the Rickroll song, God is a Woman by Ariana Grande, and When the Party's Over by Billie Eilish are all in C sharp major. Actually, Devin, Mr. Brightside is in the key of D flat. Okay, but actually, So in terms of how this key makes us feel, there were a bunch of these boys back hundreds of years ago who would write these books on the keys in music and how they evoke different emotions. But technically, instruments were tuned differently back then, and the frequencies at which they were tuned back then are not really the same as what's going on now. So it's not 100% accurate, but it's all subjective anyway. So who cares? We're gonna talk about them, and they're also just funny. So let's kick it off with Albert Lavinack. He thinks this key sounds charming, suave, and placid. But then William Gardner comes out of the gates and says that it sounds awfully dark. But then we've got good old Christian Schubart, and I'm just gonna read you what he says because he has a lot to say. A leering key, degenerating into grief and rapture. It cannot laugh, but it can smile. It cannot howl, but it can at least grimace its crying. Consequently, only unusual characters and feelings can be brought out in this key. But how do I feel about this key? Well, good question, I guess. There's a lot of tension. I agree with Albert. It's a bit charming. I feel a bit charmed by C sharp major. I feel like this key is only dark for the first 3 notes. And then the rest of it sounds pretty light and airy, like a walk in the park. So let's give this one an S tier. Why not? Throw it up there. If I wrote my own book on how keys evoke different emotions, this is what my excerpt would say. And I quote, C sharp major is nice and tense like a slab of horse meat. It's good and it doesn't stink in a bad way. Number 4, A major. Some classics that are in the key of A major are Someone Like You by Adele, Halo by Beyonce, and My Kind of Woman by Mac DeMarco. So what do the boys think of this key? Well, Hugo Riemann thinks it's a fresh and healthy life. Albert thinks it's frank and sonorous. But don't get Christian Schubart started on this key. Let's see what he has to say. This key includes declarations of innocent love, satisfaction with one's state of affairs, hope of seeing one's beloved again when parting, youthful cheerfulness, and trust in God. But how do I feel about this key? I guess it sounds like a fresh and healthy life. It sure doesn't sound like death, I'll tell you that much. I'm not really sure how a key can sound frank. I mean, the definition of the word frank is, and I quote, open, sincere, or undisguised in manner or appearance. So, when has a musical key ever lied to you, Albert? Who hurt you? A minor? And Christian really went in on his description as always. His description is actually pretty interesting because it mentions innocent love, and a lot of the songs I mentioned that are in A major are arguably, about innocent love. It's not really my favorite key, but, it's up there. Let's give it an A tier for A major. Here's my description of this key. Buckle your seatbelts. A major has a balanced sound, Like a nice pancake breakfast with a side of turkey bacon. You kind of wish there were blueberries in the pancakes or maybe bananas, but at least it came with turkey bacon on the side. Could definitely use some sort of vegetable though. Let's move on to number 3, shall we? Number 3, D major. Hey There, Delilah, Love Story by Taylor Swift, and Royals by Lorde are just a few of many hits that are in the key of D major. But what do the boys think about this key? Let's check in with them. This is what Hugo says. Resembling a spring mood and light-hearted beings that seem to be merrily throwing flowers. But then we got Ernst Power, who says this: majesty, grandeur, and pomp, and adapts itself well to triumphal processions, festival marches, and pieces in which stateliness is the prevailing feature. If you think that's a lot, get ready for good old Christian Schubart. The key of triumph, of hallelujahs, of war cries, of victory rejoicing. Thus, the inviting symphonies, the marches, holiday songs, and heaven-rejoicing choruses are set in this key. So I guess what we can gather from this is that everyone sure has a lot to say about D major. But what do I have to say about D major? Well, I guess we'll find out. I like it. It's a pretty chill key. Does feel a bit more like a spring meadow of flowers than a triumphant anthem, in my opinion. But there are songs in D major that do sound triumphant, such as Triumphant March in D major. And out of the songs I listed above, Hey There, Delilah and Love Story are absolute staples of my middle school career, so I guess I'm biased. Overall, I'm pretty lukewarm on D major, so let's give it a C tier. Get ready for my description. D major is quite a chill key. It doesn't stink. In fact, it is void of any kind of stench. I would imagine that if D major were a food, it would perhaps be a lump of salt over a steaming bowl of rice. Number 2, C major. I'm actually surprised this one isn't number 1. Hey Ya by Outkast, Stay With Me by Sam Smith, and Stay by Rihanna are just a few of the many songs that are in C major. Well, what do the boys gotta say? I'll tell you. Hugo thinks this one is translucent harmonies, simple argument and rhythm, complications of any kind are almost non-existent. And this is what Albert has to say. Simple, naive, frank or flat, and commonplace. Here comes Christian Schubart. Completely pure, its character is innocence, simplicity, naivety, children's talk. So it actually seems like there's a pretty general consensus on the key of C major. People tend to think it's naive and simple and childlike. But what do I have to say about this key? Well, let's get into it. C major is an interesting key. I mean, it is the foundation of Western music theory. It's like the cheese pizza of keys. Actually, I would go as far to say it's like the cheeseless pizza of keys. Just sauce and bread. Honestly, it's pretty boring, but you can actually do really interesting things in the key of C major if you think outside the box. Take Hey Ya by Outkast, for example. The song only uses notes and chords that are in the key of C major, but it never really resolves on the C, and it uses it more as a passing chord instead. The song does resolve a lot on the E note, which is the third note of the scale, smack in the middle of the tonic and the dominant notes. Usually songs that are in a specific key, which is like every song, will resolve on the tonic of that key at some point, like Stay With Me by Sam Smith. But Hey Ya doesn't do that, which is part of what makes that song so cool. Let's give it a B tier. Here's my excerpt on C major. C major is the vanilla ice cream of keys, but it has the potential to sound anything but that. It only stinks in a bad way when a song sounds like it's in the key of C major. And the moment we've all been waiting for. Number 1, G major. Funny Thing by Thundercat, Banana Pancakes by Jack Johnson.
Can't you see that?
And Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes are all in G major. What's interesting about C major and G major being the top two keys in music is that they complement each other really nicely. Look at the circle of fifths. They're right next to each other. And the closer to each other any two notes in the circle are, the better they sound together. Am I right, ladies? But enough about that. Let's get to the boys' take on G major. This is what Hugo has to say. Lively enjoyment, not midsummer, but spring. Young, fresh spring. Albert thinks it's rural and merry, short and to the point, classic Albert. But here comes Christian Schubart. Buckle up. Everything rustic, idyllic and lyrical. Every calm and satisfied passion. Every tender gratitude for true friendship and faithful love. In a word, every gentle and peaceful emotion of the heart is correctly expressed by this key. How do I feel about this key? Well, I'll tell you. G major is kind of like C major, but better. They've got similar vibes. G major is a pretty tender key. I would compare it to a medium rare filet if I do say so myself. I love all the songs I listed that are in G major. One of the merrier major keys for sure. We gotta give it an S tier. G major sounds like a nice trip to the Microsoft Windows XP field to have a sweet picnic with your loved ones. Inside the picnic basket is a sack of meat, and that's it. Honestly, I feel like it's pretty impossible to have one solid description for how a key in music makes everyone feel. I mean, it really depends on the song and the person. Funny Thing by Thundercat evokes different emotions in me than Banana Pancakes by Jack Johnson. Same with Hey Ya and Stay With Me. They both make me feel completely different, but they're both in C major. It really does depend on the context. But I do think these little keys and their different emotions charts are fun and cute and maybe even a little silly sometimes, maybe even a little quirky. So let me know in the comments if you want me to do a minor key tier list. Thanks. And let me know what you think of these major keys in the frickin' comments. What's your favorite major key? What is it? Tell me. Okay, bye. Bye, guys. Bye.